Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we are reading A History of Wild Places by Shea Ernshaw, up to and including the fifth B chapter of part 3. We talked about last episode how this one unfortunately has some painful chapter numbers, by which I mean they don't have any. However, the audiobook did, which was nice. So it was actually chapter 23. Maybe we could have mentioned that.
We figured it out. I'm sure we both read to the same point.
I'm sure hoping so.
Yeah. And it was actually a good spot.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the structure of the book was part of the issue here because, and not to say that the structure is an issue, just the issue for tracking it, because we start off with this kind of big chunk part 1 where I suppose, I don't know if I want to call him a main character, but I guess he kind of is, gives us kind of the detective backstory before we get into the actual day-to-day activity of the other set of main characters.
Right, it was basically just a very long prologue because it was so different. Was it all one chapter too? It was, right?
Yeah, it was. It didn't even have a chapter number on it and speaking of chapter 23 of the audiobook, I don't think that even counted that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so basically like a prologue.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is from like a different character, completely different time period as well. Not to say it was like 100 years in the past. It was only a couple years probably, but there's definitely a shift that happens between part 1 and part 2.
Do you feel like this first part... we've talked a lot in the past about like showing and telling, and do you feel like this was just kind of a lot of telling?
Yeah, I think it was like embedded with like flashback sequences, but yeah, just resulted in things being told to us and like why he's doing what he's doing, and like nothing was left to be dealt with later. Like everything about this character was kind of placed within this prologue bit, which felt a bit like an info dump, to be honest.
Yeah, because it was trying to set the scene of what you were going to get into, but and in calling it a prologue, it's interesting because it is quite long. Like in the audiobook, it was an hour and a half of just that section, and I found, not that I didn't find it interesting, but I did find it a little bit difficult to listen to for that long, in a single stretch. And it stayed dynamic enough, but it was also dense sometimes in that like he's dropping not only the information about events, but kind of his own opinions on it in like the same sentence, or like his opinions about himself even. Like that is to say, like there are moments where he's kind of self-deprecating almost, and it threw me off when it'd be like, oh, here's like an informational fact, and also here's him being down on himself. Like it would kind of just confuse me in the moment, honestly.
Yeah, I think that the thing that bothered me about it when I was reading it was like, I guess those negative moments of like him feeling guilty and like him talking down on himself, and obviously he had a lot going on, but then those questions were like answered immediately. It just didn't feel like fulfilling as like a him being characterized type of situation, because it was all given so quickly. And it's like, I get we're setting him up as quickly as we can because he needs to be a person to then go missing, presumably, but like, he could have just been the main character, right? Like,
yeah.
I had a brief moment where I thought maybe the titles as character names was like his investigation, right? Like, this is when he talked to Theo. This is when he talked to B. This is when he talked to Calla. And like, that's how the book was set up. And like, Travis was the main character, but that's not what happened.
Yeah, I totally. And he does make the point that he's technically not a detective, but I also agree that I didn't think it was going to go this way. I definitely thought it was one or the other. I don't think I was expecting this prologue at all. Like I knew that there was the rotating chapters between the other 3 characters, so I kind of thought that's what the whole book was. So I wasn't expecting him to be this character at all. Because
it does bring up like a lot, and I think the difference in Travis and Maggie as both being missing in like the same situation basically is kind of interesting, because we get a lot of backstory, we get a lot of information on Travis, but like Maggie is still very much a mystery throughout. So it's like, we didn't need all of this information on Travis for him to be missing within this story. Like,
that's a good point.
Part of him could have also been a mystery that was being solved. So I don't know, it's just an interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm curious for payoff on it.
For sure, because there is the interesting moment where he reaches Pastoral and like what happens then, which we can talk about. This episode is basically just just going to be theories conversation. Like, there's nothing else to really talk about. So it'll definitely be different from the rest of our episodes, probably.
Yeah, and with that, do we want to get
Yeah, do we want to
into
just
the
do that
beginning of
now?
it? Yeah. So we can start off talking about how Travis has this magical ability to, I guess, envision things that have happened in the past. And I think part of this conversation is just going to be working out how we think this works, because at least what the limits are, because it almost seems like he specifically sees horrible events when he touches objects, right? Like, is that the vibe? He picks an object up and then it's like, oh, like I'm seeing like a little girl getting hurt. I'm seeing my sister, committing suicide. I'm seeing someone go missing, right? Like, it feels like nothing is good. I don't know if that's the nature of what he uses it for, or just that's how it works.
I think that's just the nature of the job he's fallen into. I think he describes it as he's able to, like, tap into the memory of, like, a trail. Like, he's able to follow a trail. It's hard to describe, because, like, the 3 charm, for example, the 3 book charm that Maggie has, that doesn't follow her into the woods. She drops it before she enters it, but he's able to follow it, like use it to follow her into the woods. So it's like the object being connected to Maggie, he's then able to follow her trail. But I don't think it necessarily has to be a negative thing. It's just kind of like he's gotten into that kind of work because it's so useful for finding missing people, right?
Right. He also mentions inheriting it, and he has a conversation with his father where he effectively just tells him to hide it, right?
I think so, yeah.
Just like, be careful about what you touch.
Yeah, because I mean, it does make sense. It's probably very easy to see the negative things, or even just to see the things you don't want to see, right? Like,
yeah, just to know too much.
Yeah, he picks up his father's glasses and he sees his father basically cheating on their family, right?
Right.
And, like, that's, like, not a bad thing to know if you're, you want to know the truth of those types of things. But it is, like, too much situation. Sometimes you're better off not knowing type of thing.
Exactly.
And he does kind of fall into the worst aspect of using it. I mean, it's very useful. Like, he has his friend Ben, who becomes, like, a cop, basically, who was a PI and then became a cop, I think was the trajectory of that scenario. But he calls in Travis for help a lot of the times because Travis can track down missing people, and sometimes that results in finding people that have already been lost, like, are already dead, basically. And obviously that is a lot of emotional burden to handle. Yeah. And Travis ends up needing to find his sister as well, and that does not go well.
And he not only does it not go well, but then he kind of uses that as, like, the fodder to continue torturing himself by doing this stuff.
Yeah, like, he calls off his job, basically, after he finds his sister has committed suicide, because he was, like, hours behind her. Like, he was so close. He thinks he could have saved her. And then he eventually does use that into finding Maggie and trying to, like, find retribution for that situation, which, isn't healthy. He's just torturing himself. But his other option is kind of just, like, driving into oblivion and, like, never returning.
Yeah. He's, like, giving himself a purpose with it, yeah.
Yeah. But we do get to Maggie. It's, like, a personal case for Ben. I think he knows the parents or something like that. So Travis agrees to help. The father obviously wants to find Maggie. The mother does not seem as into it. She seems a bit more reluctant. I'm not sure if that's just because she, like, doesn't want to give herself hope. I feel like that's a reasonable thought. Or also if she's just resigned. Like, she does mention maybe Maggie didn't want to be found, which could be true. It seemed like Maggie and her mother had a tenuous relationship. But it is Maggie's mother that mentions, or that says that Travis should look up Pastoral.
Yeah, because then that kind of gives the implication to the theory of, like, oh, like, Maggie was looking to disappear into Pastoral.
Which I think makes sense in her books, which we can talk about later. But it also brings into question, like, how much the mother might know about Pastoral.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I didn't think about that. Because I was kind of even shocked, given her description of their relationship, that she would have enough information to suggest that. Like, I kind of thought, if anything, it would just come from a connection between the books and that community. So, which maybe it did. Maybe that's not that Maggie ever brought up Pastoral, but maybe, like, her mom in her concern, and especially knowing that Maggie's books are described as dark, like, maybe that connection was made elsewhere.
Yeah, and it could be afterwards the mother did her own searching and maybe found things that Maggie had about Pastoral, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it's hard to say right now. But Travis does find information on it, which seems quite easy. Like, immediately looks it up. We have like a 1902 settlement first, which was like waiting for a railroad to get built. Never was. People left. That's all that's described of that. Nothing seemed to happen. It seemed like people just left. And then that land was bought later in, was it in the 70s or 80s?
Oh, I thought it was like in the 50s.
Who can say?
Don't
was
ask
a
me, though.
time.
I'm always bad at the history stuff. This part kind of went in and out for me.
Yeah. I think I'm thinking 70s because it was like a quote-unquote group of hippies.
Okay.
So that's
a good point.
What I think of. And also because the people are still alive.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it was that they said 50 years ago.
Maybe.
And if that's the case, and we assume that this takes place in the present time, which I wasn't really thinking it did, but if that's the case, then that would line up.
Yeah. Impossible to tell the timeline in this book, to be honest.
Yeah.
But regardless, that land was bought by a group, which would call themselves Pastoral, and they set up a commune. Or is it a cult? Who can say? I'm definitely leaning one way over the other.
It's definitely a commune either way, I feel. It's just
Yeah.
whether or not it's a cult. Though, I would even argue with myself on that. They're a shockingly individualist commune.
Yeah, like one of their rules is privacy.
Yeah, which, like, good for you, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, it seems antithetical.
But yeah, Pastoral gets this group. They have like some publicity about what they do there. Like I mentioned, some people are just like, it's just a nice commune. And then some people are like, there's like a weird cult thing going on here. But it kind of falls into obscurity and it's not really mentioned again. So who knows what happens to
They
it.
do mention a point in their history where they were interacting with local communities around them. And then they kind of lock it down.
Yeah. So it's definitely a different kind of group before whatever happened now, which is a theory all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a destination in mind, and that's where Travis goes. You know, he goes in the winter, crazy, mad lad.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? But whatever. His truck gets stuck, but he's able to follow Maggie's memory, basically, of her going in these woods.
This is kind of another point where I had questions about how his thing works, because it almost felt like he mentioned at some point, like, losing track of her, like, or being nervous about losing track of her.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, it made me wonder again how it works, because I'm like, well, like, couldn't you just touch the charm again and, like, pick up where you left off? Like, I don't understand, like, how the tracking aspect works.
Yeah, I think he describes it because it's been a couple years since Maggie's been missing. The trace of her, like, in the environment is a bit more, like, abstract. Like, it's not as solidified as if it happened recently. Like if you have footprints, right, in the forest, you're able to track those. But if it rains, then they'll probably disappear. Like, over time, those will
I get
just
what you're saying,
dissolve,
yeah.
type of thing. It's just like magical tracking is basically what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it's possible that the traces of her within that environment are being lost.
Okay, that makes sense. I do remember him mentioning that, but maybe I didn't make the full connection that he was saying, and this is why I'm nervous. Again, some of this part was in and out for me.
Yeah, it was like the beginning of the book had all of this magic in it, and then we've seen like none of it since. So
yeah.
But there's like interesting bits with threes, I think, in this book. He's following trees that have like 3 slashes in them, which are kind of like markers. And then we see like 3 repeated again and again on the trees, on the book charm. There's 3 main characters. It just could be normal people like 3s. It's a very satisfying number, but you know, there's some mysticism there.
Yeah, especially with the slash marks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then so he runs up to Pastoral. This is like, I think, the very end, right? He sees someone. Someone sees him.
And it's night.
Oh, and yeah, so I didn't really make the connection that you made there.
Yeah, because immediately we learn that one of the characters, Theo, does like the night guard duty at one of the gates. So my thought was Travis must have met Theo, but there's some weird memory things that are happening in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did meet. I mean, we know Travis was in all of this, but we can get more into it later.
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts about that, especially with this added in.
Yeah, it's just also a matter of like we're halfway in and we've kind of set the stage for who the characters are. So I'm like hesitant to think it's anybody else.
I guess the only other option is what's his name? Parker,
yeah, who does the day shift. It is a possibility.
They do cover for each other.
They do. He seemed pretty genuine, though, when he didn't recognize Travis or Maggie's name, though.
Yeah, but yeah, then there's the memory aspect still, though. So.
There is still the memory aspect, you're right.
It could be. It seems most likely that it's Theo, but there's maybe some possibility that it's not.
Mm-hmm. So then we kind of are in Pastoral. That's our life now. Forget Travis. Who cares? We get Theo first, who, like we mentioned, does the night guard duty, is married to Calla. So B is his sister-in-law. They all live together in the farmhouse. And Calla and B were born in Pastoral, and Theo was brought there as an infant.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything. I thought it was interesting of them to have it be like, oh, this kid was just dropped off at Pastoral. I wonder if that'll ever be relevant, but it is an interesting like tweak to the story.
So still when they were accepting people, somebody just dropped a baby off.
Yeah.
That is a very strange situation.
Someone would have to know that it exists and be like, yes, that is like where that child should be raised, or like they will definitely take this child, or it's something like that, you know. And it just feels like there's a lot of easier options.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me where that would be important in the story so far, but it feels intentional.
Yeah, it's also interesting because Theo feels such a draw to leave.
Yeah,
for like the past year, he's been leaving a little bit more each time, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but apparently there is this rot or this sickness within the woods, and if you go into it, you will catch it and you'll die, basically. You'll die. So you're not supposed to leave. And he has been, and he hasn't been getting sick. But he does feel that draw to leave. B is similar. Mm-hmm. She also wants to leave, but I think hers is like a curiosity in having been born there almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, never having actually seen the outside world, but having heard of it through books and such.
Yeah. So yeah, theory-wise, we got a little bit in the weeds there, but I guess it's all important information. Theory-wise, though, we do get a lot of bits of Travis and Maggie being found by these three characters. So we know something has gone on. Theo leaving, he eventually finds the truck that gets stuck in the woods and notes it's been there a few seasons, which is like probably a few years. And he finds the photograph of Maggie inside the car. And he starts to obsess over it a little bit.
Yeah. He's quite bold to like not only step as far as he has. It's funny because it doesn't even seem like he's that far, but it's taken him a year of taking one more step to get there. And given his fear, like, it's crazy to me that he's still afraid of the rot, having done that for a year, but given his fear, it's crazy that he would then go into this truck and, like, take things back in with him.
I see what you mean. Like, yeah, because it's different to walk into it and then to touch things in it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like part of this was trying to figure out exactly where his comfort level was. Like, he's obviously got a lot more comfort than literally anyone else does, but he still talked about, like, other people who had gotten the rot and, like, still being concerned, like still taking it so slowly, even though he's done it literally every day for a year, because he still doesn't know what could happen.
Yeah, and this feels kind of like the thing that pushes him over the edge finally, where now it's like he can do this. Like, he is for sure not going to catch it, because there's just like such a curiosity. Like, somebody was here and not even that long ago. Like, what happened? So his curiosity definitely makes sense, and like finding this woman that is not in Pastoral and a manned truck who is also not in Pastoral, apparently, there is just such a curiosity that would probably eat at you so much, especially if you're already dissatisfied with being stuck where you are.
Well, also, especially once he gets the context that B is like, oh, I think that man was in our home, you know?
Yeah, because we get her memory of like a stranger having looked in the window who had stayed in their sunroom, which is where people used to stay when they were like becoming a part of the community, basically. Who she describes them like a fox, which is interesting considering.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, part of her memory of that event is missing. So it is a weird situation. And then obviously Calla and Theo live in that house and they had no idea anybody was in the sunroom, which is also very strange.
It's interesting to think of B's memory of that as like a missing chunk, because I almost thought that there was like a convenience being applied there of like, oh well, like she was blind, so like she didn't really see him there and she just kind of thought she heard him and like couldn't really give us a good description of what had happened because she couldn't see. But it's kind of another aspect of it to be like, oh yeah, like she might have had that memory and had it removed in some way, because there does seem to be some sort of aspect of that in this book.
Yeah, because she mentions like it feels like an absence. Like, it feels like she should be able to remember something, but it's
Mhm.
just gone. And I mean, obviously later we'll get like the remember Maggie thing in the book. So something about remembering memory is like very important. I'm curious if like maybe Travis's magic being tied to memory could, maybe he did something to their memory which caused them to not remember because of something that happened.
He's the most obvious choice right now because he already has some sort of magic to him, right?
Right.
But it would be interesting to like get as much established information about his magic as we have and not know that he's able to do some sort of manipulation of memory, because then it's just being conveniently left out when he's been pretty open about it. And I don't think I'd be happy with that as a result, just because I feel like, okay, then why wouldn't we get some sort of scene with that in that very long first section of the book? You know, it just would feel like a very convenient leave out.
Right. Yeah, that does make sense.
I have some suspicions about another character we'll be talking about soon.
Oh my gosh.
Anything else you want to say about the truck, the picture? They're pretty confident that this is not someone they know, which I think is interesting, since like, where are they?
Yeah. I mean, Calla is pretty much like, there's no one named Travis in Pastoral. So another thought is like, did he change his name? Like, is he somebody else? That is, I guess, a possibility.
Yeah, and he could get away with it more than Maggie can, because Maggie they have an image of, even if it's a poor quality one.
Right. It's just like the nobody's been in like 10 years fact is a difficulty.
I just don't think that's true.
I mean, it's obviously not true. Somebody entered. But we can talk more about what we think might, I guess, happen to them when we get through everything. Because more things are found.
Right. Calla finds the book 3 charm from Maggie's bracelet. I think it was a bracelet or necklace, one of those. And then also finds, not in that same moment, but later down the line, actually digs up book 1 from the series in a spot where she's like, oh, like, no one else would put this here. Like, who's in my space, basically, because this is like a spot I would look for things. It was clever of her to even go back and look further and like dig more, because if that's the case, like, there is no reason for her to believe anything would be there.
That's true. There is, I guess, a general curiosity you could pass it off as, but it is almost like she knew something else would be there, so she had to go back again.
I will say, one of my first thoughts when I started this part of the book, I guess it was part 2. So we get a Theo chapter, and then we immediately get a Calla chapter. And when Theo was talking about her, I kind of was like, oh, I wonder if he's like with Maggie. Like, I wonder if his partner is Maggie, and it's just like, it's like a different version of her, you know?
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, so like my first thought was like, oh, Calla is Maggie for sure. And then I kind of abandoned that thought. But then this like situation kind of makes me think about it again. Like, I know they have a picture of her and stuff, but again, like they seem to have trouble like getting a full distinguishing of her features. I don't know, like, especially with memory things happening, I was like, man, maybe there's something here, because if it's in the spaces where only she expects it, then who else would have put it there but Maggie?
Yeah, because the image is like distorted except for like one of the eyes, I think it's described as. So it's probably not that helpful. The only thing is like the hair color being different, but if Maggie dyed her hair blonde, then it could be anything.
Exactly.
But we do get the note of like, remember Maggie in the book, written in pencil. Theo confirms it's not Travis, because I guess another book found is Theo looks in the sunroom and finds Travis's journal, which like confirms he was actually there. He wasn't just imagining it, it's true. And we get notes of Travis having come to Pastoral and like seemingly having been there for a bit, that he understood what was going on. Like, people think the forest is sick type of situation. And then he also notes that he found Maggie. But in what condition did he find Maggie? I don't know.
So the fact that he left this journal behind at all makes me think that he is not the one causing memory loss. Because my suspicion is that he too has experienced some sort of memory loss. I don't think he would just leave the journal behind.
That's true, yeah.
So I think it's got to be external. Because he's learned all this information. Certainly, just like Maggie taking her keys being like a sign, which is a whole other thing, being a sign of her intending to come back. Like, I just feel like Travis's intention was to come back. Like, he brought this journal because he was going to go bring it out with him and report back. So it kind of implies that he's around somewhere, stuck somewhere, or dead, and that he did not intend to leave that there.
I'm wondering if he did intend it, though, because the last note he wrote about finding Maggie, the handwriting is it's not different handwriting, but he wrote it very clearly. Like, he wanted somebody to understand what had happened. So it's like, would he do that for himself, for his own handwriting, or did he want to make sure whoever found it and read it knew what had happened?
There's a possibility that if he knows that there's some memory thing happening here, he knew he might lose his own, and that's why he did that.
At the very least, the Remember Maggie in the book wasn't written by him, according to Theo, because of the handwriting. Although I will say the book was buried for like years, apparently, probably. So I'm wondering how distorted it is, especially if it's in pencil.
That's a good point. My thoughts on it were that it was Maggie who wrote it. And again, like going down the path of memory loss, like this is, instead of it being like a directive to people to like learn more about Maggie and figure out who she was, that it was actually like a message directed at self to remember herself.
Right, that's a possibility. I also thought it might have just been Calla who wrote it, and it was so distorted she didn't recognize her own handwriting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it's her garden. Like, who else would put it there but her, possibly? Like, she wanted herself to find it.
That's a good point. Whether or not Calla and Maggie are the same person, I think that's a good point. Because maybe she started learning more about this situation. Maybe Travis did like kind of drop the seed while he was there. And maybe even did intentionally leave information behind so that way people on the inside would figure something out. And because someone found out she knew too much, like her memory was affected.
Right, because Calla is afraid throughout this entire book of the rot and like leaving Pastoral and all of this stuff. I will say she gets like rained on, but hasn't gotten sick afterwards apparently. So that is kind of interesting. We'll see what happens with that. But she's like filled with fear constantly. But as soon as she finds this book, like something about it, she is 100% like with Theo now. Like they need to figure out what happened.
Yes. Which is so funny because their relationship is just kind of a mess. The fact that in the first chapter we get with each of them, they're like, I don't trust my partner. He's lying to me. She's lying to me. They're holding information back. Like, oh my God.
It could speak to like planted memories though. Like if neither of them have accurate memories, like if they really have not been there their entire lives, maybe that's what is like feeding into them. Maybe this, I don't want to say this is Travis and Maggie because that wouldn't make sense.
You say that now.
I know, timeline wise I feel like it wouldn't
that.
Make sense, but I agree. It is weird that B knew Travis was in the sunroom but these two did not.
That's also my biggest argument for Travis not being one of these people, is just B at least remembers the heartbeat, and I just, based on the way she's written, would get the sense that she would recognize someone on that.
Possibly.
But then I'm like, oh, but is Travis anyone then? Or is he gone? Or is he dead? Like, I don't know. Part of me does think Travis is in... I think I've been kind of saying this anyway, but I kind of think Travis is in the community somewhere and just like doesn't remember his former self. But then if that were the case, I think B would notice. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think she would notice at least if somebody new was there, right?
Yeah. There's the other thing of like, the whole 10-year, no one's been in 10 years, or like they haven't seen anyone walk up to the gates in forever, is like, I do think like there is a mass level of memory manipulation happening here, and like there probably are new people in the community, and just no one who's on the ground level like knows that their memory was wiped and that person was not there before.
Oh, that's true too. Or even that it's been 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good point too, actually. I guess memory manipulation potential makes theorizing a little difficult. There's a lot there. There's a lot for us to talk about, but it's like, wow, like pinpointing it is probably going to be very hard because that can go so many different ways. Like, we don't know what scale it's at, who's doing it.
Well, I have an idea.
Other than Travis?
Other than Travis, yeah. If Travis would probably have done it to protect himself and Maggie if he did it for any reason. That would be my mindset. If the entire cult is having their memory altered to keep them there, then I feel like there's a very obvious person who would probably do that.
And he's my top choice for who I think actually is doing this stuff, so.
Yeah, and an early fuck you to that guy, I'll be honest.
Actually. Yeah.
But we can wrap up.
Yeah, before we get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah.
But we probably should actually talk about the books that Maggie was writing. We've kind of skirted around the topic a little bit because we get like excerpts from them throughout this. But yeah, she was writing a book series called Eloise and the Foxtail. The first book called Foxes and Museums. They were children's books, but they were quite dark, really.
Questionably children's books based on the description.
Definitely she got a lot of criticism for them.
They were known for like potentially like tempting kids into odd behavior. and we didn't mention it earlier in the Travis section, but like one kid goes missing and is found dead, and it's kind of attributed to her book shortly before she goes missing.
Right. Yeah, he went off into the woods to find the underground or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, he got lost. He got lost, was found dead. Was he found dead or did he just go missing?
I think they mentioned, well, that's a good, so another thing I had trouble with in that part of the book was understanding what was like a vision or a theory or actually happened, because I feel like all three of those existed, but I thought he was found dead.
Okay.
And like that was like what they figured was the reason she went missing.
It is interesting that something about her books happens and then she goes with intent to Pastoral for some reason. I think she was also working on her next book, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. She's got an unreleased book as well at the time she goes missing.
I wonder if we'll find it. That's interesting.
I wonder if there's an implication that she's been kind of stalking Pastoral and writing her books based on them.
Yeah, because the excerpts we get is the first one, Eloise sees a fox in the window, but doesn't follow it. It's like she's too late to follow it, which kind of mimics what Bea and Travis go through, with Travis being described as a fox and like her, I guess she doesn't see him, but she does describe like a stranger in the window. So she's very aware of her surroundings and situation. And then we get Eloise following the fox, but she's bored by like normal nature and wants something darker. And then the fox like snarls at her apparently as if she's the thing to be feared. And that's kind of like, that makes me question if it's the woods that are the problem or if it's Pastoral that's the problem, right? Like the people or somebody in Pastoral that is the darkness here, as Eloise is. And then we find out what the underground museum is, which holds lost artifacts, but it has like eyes that watch you and like won't let her leave alive, which is again could be Pastoral. Like you're finding this underground in the hidden sense, I suppose, like this lost kind of commune, and then once you're there you cannot leave or you will be killed. So I definitely think whatever is going on in these books are about or connected to Pastoral. The question is, how does Maggie know about it, right?
Yeah, especially if this is supposed to be an allusion to like the sort of negative aspects of this commune and potentially like a reference to Levi. Like she would have to know so much and come out, right? Like she'd have to be so observant, so in it, and then pop out and report back, which honestly maybe makes her a suspect for this mind manipulation thing.
I will say though, like, it's been 10 years since anybody new has been in Pastoral, but Travis notes that it's been about 10 years since the first Foxtail book was published.
Oh, that's a good catch.
Yeah, it's possible. And of course, like, 10 years for Travis is probably like 12-ish years for the rest of Pastoral. So timeline-wise, she could have been there. She could have gone. She could have experienced it, and then something was going on, right? And then that's where she got kind of the motivation to write the first 5 books, and then something happened.
She got caught somehow.
Yeah, that, or like maybe the publishing of the books is what caused them to lock down. But I'm like curious about what was happening in Pastoral before the lockdown, because the rot wasn't really taken seriously until after the founder died, which happened about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Was it pretty quickly? I can't really remember. Was it pretty quickly after Levi takes over that things locked down?
I think so, yeah, because 2 original members try to leave and they get sick, or they die outside of the border, basically. And so everything is kind of locked down. So yeah, I think it is with Levi taking over that things change. So it is a question of like, what was evil about the place before he took over that would inspire these books? If there is something actually about the woods, then it could that could just be it, right? It could just be the woods that are the problem. But I don't know, the way the excerpts are written and the way Pastoral is right now, I'm not sure if it is the woods that are the problem at all.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder why, if this is based on Pastoral, like why she would write for the outside audience and not for the Pastoral audience. I don't know. I guess because she doesn't want to be noticed, if that's the theory we're taking. But it's interesting that you would just kind of come in and like make a novel from ethnographic observations of a commune and not like talk about it more, say more about it, get involved somehow. I don't know. Just I guess if that is the Maggie that ends up being, like, that's an exploitative one, you know?
Yeah, I wonder if, like, maybe she experienced something so traumatic while she was there that the only way she can, like, deal with it is to write these children's books. Like, she can't talk about it.
Maybe also, since it's the whole 10-year thing, maybe that, because I don't really remember how far back they were really interacting with folks. I guess, like, the lockdown is when they stopped interacting with folks. So if they were interacting with other folks, maybe Maggie wasn't a part of Pastoral, but was, like, visiting or, like, involved with the community somehow. And then that would, like, support your theory that, like, they locked down after that first book was released, and maybe she was, like, kicked out if she was part of it. But otherwise, like, yeah, like, she was, because she released that book, they didn't say that that's why. Like, then that's when they maybe, like, fabricated that the rot is getting worse, or finding fear tactics to, and they, I mean Levi, finding fear tactics to get people locked down so that way something like that wouldn't happen again or get back to them.
Right, because when Travis talks to one of the townsfolk that's, like, near Pastoral, but it's like a regular town, the woman notes that Maggie going missing brought a lot of attention to their town, which they didn't like, because everybody thought one of them had done something, or the town had done something, or whatever. It brought a lot of publicity to this small town. So I wonder if, like, that scenario is mimicked in the 10 years before. And, like, obviously Pastoral isn't mentioned in the Foxtail books, but if people in Pastoral recognize that it was about them, then maybe that's what caused lockdown, because they were worried about getting that kind of attention if Maggie did say something.
I would really think that it doesn't even have to come down to, like, the Pastoral community as much as just Levi, like, identifying that he's being undermined via metaphor, you know? And that's why I say, like, maybe part of it is he doesn't want the people in Pastoral to read those books, which makes it even spicier that book 1 is buried in Pastoral.
Right. Yeah, because if Pastoral is the evil, right, then it would be Levi who's the problem, which is kind of what we're thinking anyway. So yeah, he doesn't, because he makes a note to B when they're younger that, like, it's not good for her to read all these books about the outside because it makes her want to leave.
Right.
So it could be, like, yeah, similar mindset. If they read these Foxtail books that are about their situation and they realize they're trapped here, then that's just going to cause problems. Because Levi, he doesn't really, in my head, he doesn't care about people trusting him. He quite literally says, I feel like I'm losing control. Like, it's about controlling them. It's
actually about control for sure.
Yeah, so are Maggie and Travis dead? Who can say?
Because now I'm starting to think Levi disappeared them, you know?
Yeah.
If he is, and to speak more directly on it, if he is the one manipulating memories, I thought, I was thinking he integrated them into Pastoral by, like, wiping their memory, giving them some sort of new background to believe, and then becoming part of the community. But why would he even do that? Like, why wouldn't he just off them somehow and let that be it, you know?
Right, because there's another couple that ends up dead, and it's, like, Lyndon and Rose, right, who were originals in the town, and they were close with Calla and Theo, and they decided to leave. And they were original members, so, like, obviously they did not fear what was outside. They didn't care about it. And they stayed relatively close for, like, their first mile of walking to the border. And when they died, they were visible, right?
Yeah.
Their bodies were visible. So was it the rot that killed them, or was it Levi, who had just taken over at the time? And their deaths were kind of seen as, like, the start of the rot.
Well, yeah, also them leaving would definitely be a loss of control situation for Levi.
Right, because if they leave and just leave and it's fine, then anybody could leave.
Exactly.
But they're very much a visual, like, representation of this will happen if you leave. And also, they don't collect the bodies. They are declared nameless. You're not allowed to say their names per Levi's instruction, because now he's turned it into some kind of curse. Like, he is using stories like this and, like, the farmer's daughter to keep them in control. And, like, the farmer's daughter is back from that, like, 1902 settlement.
Right.
Which Travis notes when he reads about it, like, it was normal. Like, nothing was reported as strange. And it's possible they just didn't report it as strange. But Pastoral uses the farmer's daughter story and, like, that first settlement as, like, justification of something being off about this land. because the daughter goes missing for like 7 days and she comes back mangy and wild, and it's like the first sign that something is wrong with this forest. I say it's a girl that got lost in the woods for 7 days and tried to survive, and it probably wasn't great for her.
Right.
I don't know if magic was involved in that at all, or even if
Yeah.
it happened, to be honest.
Yeah.
But Levi brings it up to kind of instill this fear in them. And then obviously Calla talks about Lyndon and Rose in such a fearful way of that happening to Theo. Like, fear is just pressed into them by Levi, who feels like he's losing control over them because everybody has become so content. I don't think the rot exists. I think he's killing anybody that leaves.
I think that people who've gotten sick in the past have also been from him. That was like the earlier thought before I thought he was doing any sort of magic memory things, was that he was poisoning people.
Yeah, I thought so too. I also thought maybe he's the one that poisoned Bee and caused her to lose her sight.
Interesting. What would the motivation be? Is it because she wants to leave? Like she had been curious about it?
They kiss when they're 16, and then it's later that year she starts to lose her sight. And Bee, like, notes in her chapter, like, as soon as I lost my sight, I knew I had lost my chance to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And Levi, throughout their entire life, basically, has wanted Bee to stay, like, saying she belongs there and, like, all of this stuff. So I think it's quite possible that he was the cause of it because he wanted her to stay.
It's upsetting because it's very believable.
Yeah.
Okay, there's more things to talk about with Levi if we want. Cause I'm just like, wow, this is a lot already.
It's a lot.
Do we want to get into this whole baby situation?
Oh my god. Yeah, let's talk about a baby.
So we get this scene where Bee is at the midwife house. I forget what it's called, but the birthing hut, I think is what they called it. And Colette is having a baby, and it's definitely premature. And Bee can hear that there's some problems with her super special hearing abilities, and definitely that baby needs some medical care. And so this causes a whole stir, because if something like this happens, they have to have a whole community gathering to decide on what they're going to do. They already kind of know ahead of time that things like this don't really go well, and that Levi's probably just going to say no, and that's that. And that's exactly what happens. Levi's like, well, that baby can die because I'm not risking anyone else, and I'm definitely not risking people leaving here, which is related to all the control things we said, I'm sure. But not going to risk that to try to save this baby. So, like, yeah, let's just let that baby die. Like, let's set a grave plot aside and everything, like, from the start.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody in the town is basically like, we should try. Like, there has to be something we can do. Even Bee stands up to him, which, like, she doesn't really do in public, but she does.
Even before they start getting, like, into other intense conversations, she does that.
Yeah, and he's still like, we can't, like, I'm putting my foot down, we're not doing it. And he does, like, manipulation shit. Like, his voice obviously is very manipulative. Bee notes that later, but also we kind of see it when Calla is listening to him and is like, you know what, he's right. Like, she's kind of soothed by his words in the moment. So you can kind of see, like, how brainwashed she is, basically, in real time. And he makes himself the victim. He's like, I'll take the responsibility, like, the death will be on me, and, like, all of this kind of stuff. The classic, you know, playing the victim so that he can have what he wants, basically. But, yeah, it was a cult moment. I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, and then this is kind of what stirs up even more, like, Theo wants to go, like, save this child now, right? Like, though Levi does a really good job of talking that down, too, for a bit at least. So, but yeah, this part's crazy because there is actually a decent amount of dissent, and I don't think I was expecting that. Like, he's definitely got this balance between, like, getting what he wants and not seeming like a dictator, right? Like, he's really got kind of an art to it where it feels like this is a community where people can speak their mind, we're all making decisions together, but really behind the scenes on the back end, that's not what's happening.
Right. He's perfected the way in which to tell people exactly what they want to hear. Like, he feeds into the community by saying, we can't go back on what we've built, like what we've built here. If we leave, if we, you know, bring the rot back, if something goes wrong, then everything we've created together will be gone. And that kind of quells a lot of people. That makes it seem more like, yeah, what we've built here is more important than this baby we don't even know. Which sounds crazy to say, but it's less upsetting, right? Theo knows he's immune, and it's almost like Levi knows that too, because he doesn't say like, oh, but you might catch the rot. Like, he doesn't seem to care about it at all, to be honest. Theo is soaked in rain, which should also carry the rot, and Levi doesn't seem anxious. He doesn't try to help. He's just like flat emotionally and like, wow, you should be more careful. It's like, great. So he doesn't care about that at all, obviously, and Theo knows he doesn't have to care about it. So instead, Levi talks about, we don't even know if the world still exists out there. And that is kind of what gets Theo to like stand down, because it's true. If this exists, it doesn't matter if Theo is immune. The rest of the world will have died already.
Right.
So
there's so many mights, right? Like he says might on everything. You can justify making someone afraid of basically anything with the word might, you know? He's got to figure it out.
yeah.
B mentions like people are not happy with this decision because they would hope that if this were them in like a dire situation, they would get that sort of help. And she brings up such an interesting point that I feel like Levi doesn't really address, which is like, you guys don't have medicine, right? Like you don't have doctors, you don't have people trained up. You guys locked down before you really like learned the advances of the world. So this is like an early death sentence he's putting on themselves, because they're all going to start getting sick throughout their lives and not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, it's he like mentions, I think in the gathering, that like they have to accept what nature wants.
Right.
So he's already like planting that seed of like, if somebody gets sick, if they die, then that's just what nature wanted. And like, nature has given us so much, we have to be willing to give to nature. He's kind of like setting up that transaction, I guess is the best way to say it, because yeah, like if anybody else in that community starts to get sick or they start to die, well, we can't help them. But you should be happy to be sick and be dying, because now you will be given to nature, and then nature will provide for the rest of us.
Dangerous.
Yeah, but all of these people are eating it up.
Yeah. And then back on the Theo thing too. Sorry, I probably should have just said this then, but I do think it's interesting that Theo's like, we've been kind of casual friends. You know, we play chess together and stuff. And the fact that Levi's willing to offer him a bit of his very limited supply of whiskey, you know, I think that shows that there's a lot of trust, and maybe that's a bit of why he doesn't immediately say like, oh my God, you're covered in rain. Like he kind of has his guard down a little bit. And I'm curious to see if that will come into play a little bit more before a potential Theo running off situation.
Yeah, I don't know.
He mentions they like drink moonshine together, so they get drunk together. Seems like a shaky part of the structure there.
Yeah, and B mentions that Levi sometimes just drinks like on his own because he's so stressed about everything.
Yeah, right. He's got the world on his shoulders, so.
Right. It is like, it's hard to know how evil he is, and I do think he's evil. Mm-hmm. To be very clear, I think he's evil.
I can't see it going another way. I mean, the author did do a good job of, I think, establishing trusts in the early parts, but...
Yeah, but the issue is he was groomed for this position by Cooper, right? So it's like, yeah, nothing really started until Cooper died, but what was happening in the before?
Yeah, what did that sort of grooming process look like, too?
Right, like the only original member left right now is Henry, who is completely quiet during the baby discussion. He offers no words. So, yeah, like the before part is such an unknown about what it was like, about what Cooper was like, especially. I don't know. Was he a good guy or not?
I mean, he wouldn't have locked it down probably, based on the fact that they were not locked down for 50 years.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, this is such a far-fetched idea, but because there's magic about, like, if Cooper hasn't actually died, or, like, his death was something else.
Like Levi set something up.
That, or, like, some kind of deal was made with the land, right? And then Cooper kind of became the rot that's in the forest. So there is something there. That'd
be cool, but I don't know, because I don't really think there is a rot. So.
Yeah, I don't think there is either.
I have kind of an interesting theory, I think, in my opinion. I'm just guessing everyone and anyone to be secretly Maggie, but I was thinking maybe Colette is Maggie, and there's two main reasons. One is I think Colette is referred to as not really talking much about her past, which, like, maybe if someone had their memories wiped, they wouldn't talk about their past very much, you know, like it would feel like a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is it would explain why Levi is so brash about her kid. because if she is there in the commune still, but has kind of established her former self, at least, as being on his bad side with the books and stuff, then maybe he feels like this is a bit of revenge.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Colette is also the most recent addition, right?
I believe so. At least she's mentioned to have come shortly before the locking down.
Right. And we said like the 10 years is tenuous. If memory stuff is going on, who can say if it's actually been 10 years or not. But I can't remember if we ever get Colette described.
I don't remember.
But she is quiet, described as quiet. And she hasn't really found her place, I think, in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would make sense. I think Levi not caring about the kid isn't as strong as an indicator because he also doesn't care about his own kid too much.
Yeah. I honestly, when that came out, I thought he was going to tell her to abort it.
That'd be crazy in this middle of nowhere.
I agree. I hear you. But just the fact that he even clarified, he was like, no, I want you to have it. It's like, oop, that means not having it was an option.
It's because, like, they need the population,
for
right?
Sure,
like,
for sure.
They need people to have kids.
Yes. I was just like, given that he is, like, willing to sacrifice Colette's kid, I just thought he'd be like, yeah, cut it. Like, it's not happening.
It definitely does put Bee's life at risk, I think, a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now that she's kind of against him. Because Bee basically helped to lead this commune as well.
Yeah,
and
totally.
She gets no recognition for it. And had this quote-unquote secret love with Levi.
Ugh.
And now Levi's gonna marry this more, like, approachable, well-liked baker in the town. Because it looks better. And you know what? I'd be fucking fuming if I would be.
Oh my god. Because I remember asking early in the book, like, man, why aren't they just, like,
together?
Right. Yeah, like, married or moved in or even just a little more formally in a relationship? Like, why do you only see him once a month? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it was weird because I thought they were going to do, like, the straight forbidden romance dynamic where it's forbidden for no reason. But no, it's just he was a piece of garbage.
When he was coming out with all this, like, Alice, whatever, like, secret love and some other father for the baby, I was, like, livid. That's when I really was like, no, I hate Levi.
There's just no way he's a good guy.
I also briefly thought that Alice was Maggie. I'm telling you, I just thought everyone was.
You just thought everybody was Maggie.
My strongest push is actually for Colette, though.
Yeah. Obviously, the photo makes that, like, questionable, but I think the photo is, like, entirely too damaged to really be helpful in any regard.
I think the photo is supposed to be a red herring, so.
Yeah. Because also, Theo asked Calla, like, was there a picture of her in the book? But it doesn't have the dust jacket, so, like, there is no picture. Because I think he wants to actually know what she looks like.
Yeah.
Because the photo is just it's like a no-go. They know she's blonde. That's, like, basically it. But, yeah, I guess, like, commune-wise, I think we're pretty much in agreement the rot doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess the rot as magic could happen, but it feels like it might be a red herring. And, like, whatever magic is happening here is probably Levi killing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think everybody kind of has something magical going on, like Bee with whatever she has going on. Calla has dreams that might have some magic in them. She at least feels like a pull towards something.
Yeah.
Like in her dreams, which could be like magic related. And then Theo feeling a connection to the outside could also kind of be magic-y, maybe.
Mm.
If everybody has magic, we don't know if that's the case, but feels like the vibe. And then, yeah, I guess big mystery. What happens to Travis? What happens to Maggie? You think Maggie is still alive in the village somewhere?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm
Yeah,
feeling?
I think there's a pretty good argument for her just being killed by Levi too, but it's more fun to guess that she's secretly Colette, so.
Okay. What do you think happened to Travis?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that too. I was like, do I also think Travis is secretly someone? I think the wildest would be Travis is secretly Levi, but I don't think that's the case. I just think it would be fun. Maybe I'll run with, I think Travis left the community, like he was there but left and saw that Maggie was part of the community in some way and decided to leave her there.
Oh, interesting.
And like maybe like left the journal behind so that way he's like, oh, I don't have anything to report out. I like lost my journal. I think that could be cool.
Oh, yeah, because there is quite a lot of maybe she wanted to leave, kind of brought up in the first part of this book. It's brought up by multiple different characters. So I guess that could be the case. Pastoral just seems so evil. Like,
yeah, I hear
would
you.
he actually leave her there? Especially if he knew about, like, them thinking there's a rot and, like, all of this stuff going on. Would he just leave?
Well, let's run with this a little bit more of Maggie not having a memory of her former self. maybe he sees no reason to pull her out because it would be relatively unsafe to do so because she wouldn't have an identity, you know?
Right.
Like bringing her back to her family would be useless because she might not even recognize them.
Yeah. I feel like it would be quite unsatisfying if Maggie and Travis were both just dead. I guess it could work if they were, and then figuring out the secret of them caused the commune to kind of collapse with what had happened.
Yeah. If it's like the thing that makes them lose trust in Levi.
Yeah. Because I think that is what makes the most sense.
Oh, for sure. I think it's the most logical.
Yeah. I think it would be a little saddening because I kind of like Maggie and Travis. Like, we didn't get much time with them, but I kind of want them to be okay.
Yeah. There's definitely a version of this story where we find out that Maggie was also maybe not a good person. And we just have to assume she's on the protagonist's side, so.
Yeah. There's no way to know. If they're alive, I think it is possible Maggie could just be in the town. Like, I think the picture of her getting brought up so much means that she could be hidden in plain sight within this town. As you mentioned, I don't really have anybody I think it could be quite clearly, but she could be there. I don't know. Travis, if he was there, it's possible he like recruited the help of the farmhouse trio to kind of help him find her, or like maybe try and bring her back to herself. Like, Maggie's character as somebody else could have been the one to write Remember Maggie. So maybe there's just a character that's missing right now that's like supposed to be here. And it's possible Travis just went back into the woods. Maybe he's been living there the whole time. I don't know. It's also, I think there's a building described as like being where people go when they need to be isolated from the community, right? Like, it's like a far off building people don't really go to. I'm wondering if maybe Travis or Maggie and Travis are kind of locked in there by Levi, and he's kind of been like keeping them. And then, yeah, he did some memory stuff for everybody else.
That would make sense, honestly, because there's kind of was there a horror tag on this book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I may have made up that building, but I feel like I remember a kind of isolation building.
I'm trying to remember that. I feel like I remember something like that, but they have the sunroom too, so.
Yeah, which that's pretty isolated in their house, but I think there's just a building kind of on its own, because when somebody gets rot, or it's supposed they get rot, they have to kind of be isolated, and something happens to them. We don't really know what it is, but we kind of get imagery of like them being bound, and like, yeah. I think blood is involved. Some torture shit is happening. Yes. I don't know.
We're totally gonna see that before the end of the book.
Yeah. So I think it's possible wherever that happens, away from everybody else, might be where Travis and Maggie are. And they can't be put into the village because new people would be noticed by like B, which would kind of change, like it would ruin this kind of bubble that Levi has created for 10 years if new people showed up and they were fine. Like, suddenly everything he's building kind of falls apart. So he can't just put them in. Even if he could change their memory, like, I think she would still notice, right, if something had happened. Enough that she would feel like off about it and would probably begin to question it. I mean, that becomes less of a problem if Levi just tries to kill B, which is entirely possible.
Yeah. They
could be dead, but then I feel like the trail kind of goes a bit cold almost. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know where they go from where they are unless they find something in Levi's house. But nobody has any reason to go to Levi's house now. So it's like, what do they find? If Theo leaves to take care of the baby, maybe he finds information about them missing on the outside. Maybe Ben comes around because he's been looking for Travis. Like, maybe he finds Travis outside. I don't know. I guess my theory is I don't have a theory. My theory, I guess, is I think I want them to be alive and kind of trapped within Pastoral. Mm-hmm. Because if they can talk to anybody, then Levi's everything has kind of fallen apart. Why he would not just kill them? I don't know. Let's have some fun. You know?
Give some control in some way? I don't know. Control over their lives. Though I guess, like, killing them would also do that, but
I guess Travis is useful if he has magic, right? Like,
that's true.
He is not a normal person. There might be something about him that Levi wants.
Yeah, because it's definitely a useful skill. Okay. You'd have to find out that is the case somehow.
Yeah, I mean, if Travis went there looking for Maggie and eventually talks to Levi, he could explain how he found her. That's a possibility.
No, I like that a lot. I like the idea that they're alive and held.
Yeah, we'll settle with that.
All right, sounds good.
I think it's a lot simpler if they're just dead.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You know, simple. Ugh, who wants simple?
I agree.
I feel like that's everything. It was a lot. I feel like it was a lot. We certainly had a lot of notes, but we actually didn't talk that long.
Oh yeah,
to be
kept
fair,
it manageable this time.
yeah, I think it helped that we kind of just did it by theories. We didn't try to like talk about what happened and then do theories, because that would have been hell. That would have been hell on earth.
Messy.
To be fair,
Yes.
Hopefully the theories made sense. We did try to like group them together quite well, but obviously things lead into things, and we like to talk. But
that's why we're here.
You've surely read the book with us, like surely, so you know what's going on.
Excited for the second half.
Yes, actually also excited for the second half. As always, our Twitter is 5050_books if you have your own thoughts and theories. Everything else in the description. Content warnings, obviously, also always in the description. And we'll finish this up next time. I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, and I'll add too, even if you are listening to one of our episodes well after it has released, I would encourage you to send out those thoughts and theories, because we would definitely be interested to know what you thought when you were reading them.
We may have less memory of what happened, but, it'll still be fun.
Yeah, I would love to know.
For sure, for sure. All right, see you on the flip side.
Bye.